Good morning. It is 10 a.m. on Thursday, or excuse me, it's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, June 25th. And I think we're live. Not sure because I'm not seeing there we are. Okay. So it's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, June 25th. Good to see you. It's time for our weekly webinar. And before I forget, because I didn't put it in my notes, there is no webinar next week. Just remember that. There is no webinar next week. I have some continuing education courses to do all morning long for my certified financial planner designation. So I'll be tied up with that next week, and there was no other day that I could schedule that. So we'll do a recording to send out to you, kind of a best of for that webinar next week. All right, so I hope I made some adjustments to my volume today and with some technology, so I hope you're hearing me well. Good morning, Leighton. Good to see you. So we're going to have our typical format today. We're going to go through a couple items from our Slott Report. We're going to add back in, like we have, not back in, but we're going to continue Heather Schreiber's information on Social Security. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Medicare. So I talk a lot about Heather and her Social Security expertise, but she's also a whiz at Medicare. So Medicare questions. So we're going to talk about Medicare. And along those lines, our financial focus today is going to be talking about the Social Security and Medicare Trustees report that came out last week. I think it was the 18th. So once a year, our federal government produces this report, and you can find it right online if you Google Social Security and Medicare Trustees report. And I'll have the link for you in our financial focus section. But there are changes this year, and they're not changes for the good. So we're going to talk about what those changes are, how they may affect you, what lawmakers can do potentially, and what you can do. So that'll be at about the half-hour mark if you're just joining us on a recording or listening on the webinar. And you should be able to fast forward. If this is a recording, you can fast forward or edit. So we're gonna that's about the half-hour mark. And I talked about we're gonna do the Slott some information from the Ed Slott group. We're gonna talk about Heather Schreiber's some information from Heather for Medicare today. And we're going to talk about the markets too. So and then at about the 30-minute mark, we're going to get into our financial focus, which again we'll be reviewing the Social Security and Trustees report. And just as a reminder, I know I said it just a minute ago, but there will be no webinar next week, so we'll see you in a couple weeks. So let's jump into. Oh, good, it worked this time. I didn't check. Let's jump into the Slott report. So we've got some information. And the first is part of the, I'm sorry, this isn't part of the mailbag. So this is a report that Ian Berger did. It was just questioned, so it struck me as a mailbag question. But the question is in this report: are my SEP and simple IRAs safe from creditors? And this is from Ian from last week. So read along with me here. You are not alone if you have concerns that your IRA or workplace plan savings could be lost if you're forced to declare bankruptcy or wind up in the losing end of a civil lawsuit. After all, we all count on those savings for a financially secure retirement. Fortunately, there is usually some degree of creditor protection for retirement accounts. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case for SEP and simple IRA plan funds. Those accounts may not always be protected against creditors. Let's start with the good news. If you must declare bankruptcy, your SEP and simple IRA accounts can't be reached by bankruptcy creditors. That's because the Federal Bankruptcy Code provides a complete shield for those funds. Traditional Roth IRAs are also protected under the Bankruptcy Code, but that law imposes a dollar limit on the amount of IRA funds that are free from creditors. That dollar limit is indexed every 3 years based on the cost of living. On April 1st, 2025, the dollar limit increased from $1,512,350 to $1 million. Just trying to get that highlight off. $1,711,975 effective through March 31st, 2028. Importantly, this dollar limit does not take into account amounts rolled over from employer plans like 401ks. Unfortunately, the news is not as good for SEP and simple IRAs when non-bankruptcy creditors come after those funds after winning a lawsuit. Many workplace retirement plans are shielded from these creditors because the plans are covered by the federal ERISA law, which usually provides rock solid protection. SEP and simple IRAs are technically considered ERISA retirement plans, so what's the problem? The problem is that ERISA denies those plans the complete protection against general creditors that it gives to other employer plans. The language in ERISA is not crystal clear, but that's how the courts have interpreted it. It's actually really kind of crazy because it refers to SEPs and simples as kind of ERISA plans, but doesn't give the protection. So it kind of leaves them in this state of limbo, and that's always not a good place to be when you're allowing courts to decide that. So some states have their own laws intended to provide a state shield against general creditors trying to reach SEP and simple IRA accounts. That would seem like another way to protect these monies from non-bankruptcy creditors. But again, no luck. ERISA has a provision that says for ERISA-covered plans, any state law that relates to ERISA retirement plans is disallowed. The fancy word is preempted. State creditor protection laws clearly relate to SEP and simples, which are ERISA plans. So when it comes to non-bankruptcy creditor protection, SEP and simple IRA owners may be stuck between a rock and a hard place. They do not have federal protection because ERISA has a carve-out for SEP and simple IRAs, and they don't have state protection because state creditor protection laws apparently cannot apply to ERISA plans like SEPs and simples. This was exactly the conclusion of a 2002 federal appeals court decision, Lampkins versus Golden, scrolling up, that covered residents of Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. There haven't been any similar court decisions covering residents of other states, but those residents also may be out of luck. What to do? If you have a SEP or simple IRA and are concerned about creditors, consider moving those funds to an IRA where you will likely receive at least some state creditor protection. Owners of businesses with SEP or simples who have creditor concerns may want to consider terminating those plans in favor of 401ks, where again the funds will likely be better protected. So I have a client who has a simple plan, and simple plans are this is one of those oxymoron kind of situations, or just we always hear bills coming out of Congress that seem to have the opposite effect of what the bill states. But it's called a simple plan, and it is anything but simple in operation. So it's really kind of a pain in the neck, not just for the employer, but the payroll company, or if you're using a payroll company, and certainly the custodian, the investment custodian that's handling it. So today it almost makes no sense not to have a 401k, and creditor protection certainly is one of those reasons. So here's the mailbag. So coming from now, the mailbag is when people write in questions and the Slott analysts respond to those questions. So the first is RMD calculations and qualified charitable distributions. Today's Slott Report mailbags. So this is from last Thursday, and this is from our friend Sarah, writes this. And the question that came in is, I am age 85 and my wife is age 75. If I die first and my wife inherits my IRA, are the required minimum distributions, that's RMDs, that my wife must take after my death calculated using her age or my age? And the answer is, and that's from Richard. Hi, Richard. If your wife inherits your IRA, she can do a spousal rollover to her own IRA or keep the account as an inherited IRA. With either option, the RMDs will be calculated using her life expectancy. And that's the life expectancy. Well, he says the IRS uniform lifetime table is used if she does a spousal rollover. New rules under the Secure 2.0 Act would allow her to use that table for the inherited IRA as well. It used to be that you had to use a single life table for an inherited IRA, but now for a spouse, and I think that was just last year or earlier this year maybe, then you can use that single lifetime table, or that uniform lifetime table, which is there's typically less of a withdrawal rate. And you can find that table on our website if you go to attleborowealth.com. That's attleborowealth.com, and slide over to the slot corner section. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll have to put in your email address, but you can download any forms that are on that website, including the uniform lifetime table. All right, good answer, Sarah. So next question. Good day, folks. I have an old stretch inherited IRA and would like to do a qualified charitable distribution, or QCD, with my RMD. Any problems with this idea? Thank you, and I really enjoy the webinars, Jim. Hi, Jim. Glad you're enjoying Ed's webinars. Beneficiaries can do QCDs from inherited IRAs. However, the beneficiary must be age 70 or older. If you qualify, you can do a QCD from your inherited IRA. So just for a point of clarification, she's talking about the beneficiary of the inherited IRA, not the beneficiary of the charity. I know it seems obvious, but you'd be surprised at some of the questions we get. So let's jump into Heather Schreiber's Social Security and Medicare topic. So this one's about Medicare. So this person writes in and they wrote, I'm turning 70 years old in September, but plan to keep working and won't retire until December. I'll have employer health coverage through the end of the year. Should I wait until January to apply for Medicare? First, I am assuming you have already confirmed. So I'm sorry, this is Heather's response. Let me just drop that down so we can see. So that's the question. I'm turning 70 years old in September, but plan to keep working and won't retire until December. I'll have employer health coverage through the end of the year. Should I wait until January to apply for Medicare? First, Heather writes, first, I am assuming you have already confirmed with your employer that your current coverage is creditable, meaning that your employer has 20 or more employees. If so, yes, you can plan to have your Medicare coverage begin January 1. However, to avoid any potential delays or gaps in coverage, I recommend submitting your Medicare application by November for a January start date. If you do not already have Part A, your enrollment will be backdated up to 6 months. If you are contributing to a health savings account, you will want to stop contributions by June to avoid excess contributions for any months you are retroactively covered by Part A. When you apply for Part B, your employer needs to complete Form CMS L564. Everybody knows that, right? Request for employment information. Let me scroll up here to verify both your group health plan coverage and your employment dates. This helps with a smooth transition from your current coverage to Medicare. Finally, if you have not already done so, do not forget to file for Social Security benefits to begin in September when you reach your 70th birthday milestone. Alternatively, you can wait until January to coincide with your Medicare start date, thereby avoiding double health coverage. If you choose this option, you may request retroactive payments back to your 70th birthday without a reduction in your maximum Social Security benefit. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, the Slott Group. So let me say, I've been reading these reports to you, sharing these reports to you for a while now. And we just added Heather's information or Heather's reports just within the month, within the last 30 days. And I've already heard that many of you find it valuable. So I share these reports with you because I find them so valuable when they come in. So I get, we're in contact with Heather all the time, obviously, as part of our team. But, she does a great newsletter for us. And as I'm going through that newsletter, I'm always sharing information with the team and thinking of things that can help us in situations. And it just occurred to me that it would be good to share it with you too. And again, I'm not looking for you to become experts. I'm just looking for you to become aware. So just remember my goals for you. I want you to stay educated. I want you to stay educated so that you can stay on top of things and be able to ask good questions. I want you to stay inspired to make changes. So there may be things that you learn on these webinars that say, hey, you know what, I have to do this to potentially avoid this action in the future. I always joke and say when I'm talking to people, because one of the common things I hear all the time is, geez, I wish I would have known this before. I wish I would have met you 10 years ago. I wish I would have met you 5 years, whatever the number is. And I always say, I've never had anybody say, I wish I would have waited 5 more years. So, use this education to be inspired to make changes that could benefit you in your future. Open your mind to different ideas and different ways of thinking about planning and investing. It is really easy to fall into the old ways of thinking because these things are still being taught out there. I had a conversation with a woman about a week ago, and she said her CFP is recommending a Roth conversion, which is really good to hear, but it's way too small potentially for her. So you've got to really shake up how you're thinking and be able to look at things differently. As I said, stay educated so you feel confident in the plan and the strategies that are put into place, and stay updated so you can make adjustments along the way. So they're my goals with these webinars. I hope I'm hitting them all for you. If I'm not, let me know. And if you feel I am, let me know. I always like hearing positive feedback too. So let's talk about the markets. So this is from our internal analyst, Lydia, who joined us. She's just about a little over a month ago. She's doing a great job so far. Thank you, Lydia. So Lydia lets us know that the U.S. financial markets continue to be resilient, with the Federal Reserve rates steady for now, economic data cooling, and global geopolitical tensions flaring. Major indices. So when we talk about indices, we're talking about the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, things that you may see on your computer screen or your TV screen. So when you hear us talk about major indices, that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to read through a few of those in the returns, specifically last week. So she writes, major indices were relatively flat last week. The mood was cautious as investors weighed the latest Federal Reserve policy signals, rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, and mixed economic data. Boy, that is a really professional way to say it is kind of crazy out there right now. So we've got flare-ups all around the world. We've got really uncertain economic direction. The Fed is holding steady, certainly for now, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I'm actually surprised to see that the market's holding as steady as it is with all this uncertainty. So that's good. That's good news. The cautious mood suggests that investors are awaiting a clear signal on inflation and interest rates and global developments. As expected, the Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged at 4.25 to 4.5%, citing the need for more data before moving. One of the Fed governors, Christopher Waller, suggests a rate cut as early as July could be possible if inflation continues to ease. Economic data released last week indicated a gradual cooling of the economy. So retail sales fell by 0.9%. That was worse than what was expected. Initial jobless claims rose to 240,000, the highest level since late 2023. Inflation data showed a modest increase of just 1% month over month, keeping the year-over-year figure at 2.4. That was positive. The leading economic indicator edged down 0.1% in May to 99.0, continuing a 6-month decline. On a positive note, the Consumer Confidence Index rebounded to 102 in May, largely driven by improved labor market sentiment. We talked about geopolitical tensions, what's going on with Israel and Iran last week. That continues, and oil spiked over that. U.S. dollar softened. There's just a lot of really good information in here. And even so, the international markets have been an interesting market so far this year, and it is kind of a case study for strong asset allocation. So one of our 3 pillars, asset allocation. So we probably don't talk about that as much as we should. We focus a lot on principal protection and account segmentation because it's very, very different. Everybody, whether it's planned or unplanned, you have asset allocation. But good, purposeful and well-balanced, well-managed asset allocation can really make a difference. And we're going to talk about some of the international markets specifically, but our analyst writes, while international developed markets were negative for the week, losing 1.45, they continue to far outpace domestic U.S. markets here. So we're talking about global markets that don't include the U.S. and continue to outpace domestic markets here. Year to date, the MSCI Europe, Asia, and the Far East index is up 16.28%. Emerging markets ended the week relatively flat, but posted a strong 12.26% year to date. So you should not avoid those markets overall, right? You want to make sure, and in the U, I talked about this last time, but in the U.S. here, we tend to have a U.S. bias, but the international markets are something that you should probably pay attention to. Fixed income markets, so these are bonds. When we talk about fixed income, the Bloomberg U.S., they remain steady. The Bloomberg U.S. Aggregate Bond Index, it was up or is up 2.95% year to date. So that's as of last Friday. So this week, today, we see new home sales. Powell and Chairman Powell continues his testimony. Tomorrow, we see first quarter gross domestic product, the final reading. And Friday, we see personal consumption price index. So thank you. Thank you, Lydia, for that. So this is something I always like to do, and I kind of like the way Lydia's laid this out. So I always like to look at analysts' views on the economy and the markets, and I want to see, conflicting views. So let me share some conflicting views. So Bank of America Merrill Lynch highlights the resilience. So they're bullish, right? They're expecting the markets and the economy to continue to do well. The Bank of America Merrill Lynch, same company, highlights the resilience of consumer spending and labor market, views recent growth data as robust, signaling that a recession remains unlikely. Goldman Sachs trimmed its 12-month U.S. recession probability to 30%, citing reduced trade policy uncertainty and modest tariff effects so far, along with stronger than expected inflation trends. KPMG projects growth will slow this summer, but suggests we will avoid an official recession through at least 2027. So then who's on the other side of that? Who's bearish? JP Morgan warns of 50% recession odds, citing persistent trade tensions, high deficits, inflation, and slowing business activity. Business Roundtable CEO survey. CEO sentiment is the weakest since the pandemic, with major pullbacks in hiring and investment driven by policy uncertainty. So when you have these big players who can't agree, and this is just a sampling, what do you do? Well, you still have to. We always take the position of being, cautiously optimistic, or defensively optimistic is actually the word that we use, or the phrase that we use. So defensively optimistic. So what does that mean? We want to see our investments grow. We want our money to continue to earn money. We want to still be in a position where we can enjoy the comfort and confidence of retirement that we want. Most of our clients are building or on the doorstep, if not already in retirement. So we want to either be set up for the type of retirement that gives us confidence and comfort that we want or desire, or continue to be in that position. So how do you make decisions around your investments when even the major players can't decide the sentiment and where we may be heading? And that's using the 3 pillars: strong asset allocation, well managed, well monitored asset allocation that is driven by your plan. Financial planning, for sure, comprehensive financial planning and a repeated process of financial planning, so that you're always staying on top of your needs, goals, and potential issues. Asset allocation, I talked about principal protection and account segmentation. So you all know about those. We continue to talk about them. If you want more information about the 3 pillars or anything else we talked about, you can reach out to us at questions@attleboroughwealth.com. That's questions@attleboroughwealth.com. Okay, let's talk about specific indices, right? The index that I was just talking about. Last week, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 0.07%. Year to date, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is only up 0.06. The S&P 500 it was down last week, 0.12%, but year to date is up 2.12%. The NASDAQ. So that was the S&P 500. I don't know if I said NASDAQ, but the S&P 500 was down 0.12%. Up year to date, 2.12%. The NASDAQ was up 0.22%, but is only up 1.06% for the year. Now, alternatively, as we said before, the MSCI World Index, less the U.S., is up 15.95%. Now, this doesn't mean that you should shift all your money from U.S. markets to global markets. It means that you should have proper asset allocation among and with all markets, proper asset allocation. The MSCI Europe, Asia, and the Far East, as I said earlier, is up 16.28. Emerging markets are up 12.26. These are all yearly numbers, even though they were down last week. And then we had the bond markets we talked about. The U.S. aggregate bond market was up, or is up, 2.95% for the year, was up slightly last week. As I said, the Fed funds target stays the same, 4.5. And we continue to have what's called an inverted yield curve, where you get more interest for shorter-term bonds than you do for longer-term bonds, which is a problem. So it's time for our financial focus part of our webinar. And if you're just joining us, this is the it's the 28-minute mark, but this is the 30-minute mark of our weekly webinar. So the weekly webinar, we talk about, we have some information from the Slott Group with some good IRA distribution and retirement plan distribution strategies and questions. We have a new segment from our Social Security analyst, Heather Schreiber, that talks about Social Security and Medicare. So they shared some good information there. You can always go back and watch that if you haven't watched it, if you're just coming in for this segment. But today in the financial, and we talked about the markets. So we talked about the markets as well, and some thoughts and ideas about where we're headed. So this portion is what we call the financial focus. So this is our financial planning strategy segment. And today we're focused on the Social Security and Medicare. So last week there was a report that came out, and it's the Social Security and Medicare Trustees Report. This is not a new thing. It comes out every single year. And it tells us exactly when the trust funds for both Social Security and Medicare are set to run out of money. So if you've been paying attention at all, you know that it's a very short period of time. So we're going to go over, I'm just going to show you a link for the Trustees Report. There's an executive summary. If you're interested, you should read that. And but then there's a very, very long, detailed report. So I'm just going to give you the website for that you can review. But again, there's a board of trustees, and they review the financials and they do projections, and it's something you should all pay attention to, because it potentially affects all of us here in the U.S. I'm going to talk about some key takeaways of that report. I'm going to talk about what lawmakers can do. I'm going to talk then about what maybe you could do. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So here's the website for the Trustees Report. And the best thing to do, you can write all this down. You can try to capture it. The best thing to do is you can just Google or do a search engine, whatever search engine you use, of 2025 Social Security Trustees Report. You don't even have to put Medicare, just Social Security Trustees Report, and you'll find it. But here's a snapshot. Now listen, I compared the 2025. I hope you can see this. 2025 and 2024 trustees reports. So this is something I keep in my notes all the time, just so I have it top of mind. And it showed that last year in the 2024 report, Social Security. So I'm up here to Social Security. Social Security was set to run out of funds in 2033. So you can't really see that because it's on a black background, but it's there. It's there. Medicare was scheduled to run out of funds in 2036. So what does that mean when we talk about Social Security and Medicare running out of money? Well, there's only so much money coming in to pay benefits. So Social Security is kind of like a Ponzi scheme, right? So the money that comes in from workers pays for benefits. Now, what happened is they saw that, well, okay, we're going to eventually run out of money here. There's not enough workers to pay for people receiving benefits. Let's start a trust fund. So they started this trust fund, and this is where the trustees come from. So this is for both Social Security and Medicare. And then the remaining amount, the amount that's the shortfall, there's a funding shortfall every year. The remaining amount comes out of the trust fund. So when the trust fund's depleted, last year there was a 21% cut in benefits. And then, and here we had for Medicare, so that was last year, 2024 was 2033. That's when the trust fund was scheduled to go to zero. So that would result in a 21% cut in benefits. Medicare had a little longer. Some of it had to do with changes to the Veterans Administration and how they pay for medical expenses, or maybe even account for medical expenses. But you can see here there was. I'm just drawing on the side here because it's hard to see in the black. There was a 11% shortfall. So again, that was 2024. So let's look at this year and let's look at what changed. So I'll make this a little larger. Well, Social Security stayed the same as far as the year, right? It's still 2033, but we've got deeper cuts. It went from 21% to 23%. So that's not insignificant, And the thing is that I love teaching live classes, and one of the things I always ask when I talk about the funding of Social Security and these trusts, these cuts in these trust funds, I say, who's going to agree to that? Who's going to sign up for that 23% cut? And I'm raising my hand. For those of you just listening on the podcast, I'm raising my hand. So I'm saying, raise your hand if you would sign up for and accept those 21%, the 21 or 23% cut in your Social Security benefits. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't think anybody's actually raised their hand. Maybe one person. There's many times, depending on the size of the class, there's often one contrarian in the room that makes our classes more interesting. But don't be that person, by the way. But it's not that I'm opposed to contrary points of views, but some people just like to be contrarian. But so that's a deeper cut, and nobody's going to accept that. So Medicare changed, right? Medicare in 2024, so this stayed the same. 2033 was the same year for Social Security, but we got deeper cuts. We went from 21 to 23. Medicare went from 2036, to 2033. So we lost 3 years. We lost 3 years in funding of Medicare. So that's troubling, of course. And you can see that there is an 11% shortfall in payments for medical service affecting 79 million enrollees. So 79 million enrollees for Medicare, 71 million beneficiaries for Social Security. So these numbers are significant, and we're within a decade. So this feels like a really short period of time to me. I don't know how it feels to you, but it feels like a really short period of time. So let me give you some key takeaways. So let's read this together because I think it's important. So this information, so I shared with you where you can find the actual report, the Social Security Trustees report. So again, if you just go to ssa.gov, and if you're not familiar with ssa.gov and you're within I'd say 10 years of retirement or 5 years of retirement. You should be, because that's the place you go and you can access your benefit projections. You set up an account for yourself. You can access your benefit projections and stay on top of that. And because you should review that to make sure there's not any errors, because that's a lifetime pension for you. You should be paying attention to it. And then the Social Security Trustees, Social Security and Medicare Trustees report is part of that, or on that website. So you can find it there. The information you're seeing here with these nicely colored blocks is from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. I refer to this group a lot because they just have a lot of great information, certainly about these issues. And they appear to be non-biased, but you never know. So this is from June 18th, and they wrote, this is the day that the report came out, but I'm just going to share this with you. Today, the Social Security and Medicare trustees released their annual reports on the program's financing, showing that the future of these vital programs remains at risk. The Social Security trustees note that the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, that is actually what Social Security is called, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, is expected to become depleted in 2033, the same year noted in the last two reports, and as the Congressional Budget Office projected earlier this year. So this is not a standalone thing. We get reports from not only the Social Security and Medicare trustees, we get reports from our own Treasurer's report, and that report is just shocking. There's a statement in there that they have every year that says something like the fiscal path of the United States is unsustainable. Which is just really the fact that this isn't on the top discussion on every lawmaker's agenda is just shocking to me. Anyway, so back to here. So and then the Congressional Budget Office also does reports, and then we have independent organizations like the Penn Wharton study that came out a couple of years ago that said, if we don't do something by 2045, there's no, I think it was 2045. There's no turning it around. There's no fixing it. So we've really got a short window to fix this for ourselves and the people who come after us. All right, so we're at the Congressional Budget Office. Upon depletion, we're right here. Upon depletion of the Social Security Trust Fund in just 8 years, millions of older Americans would face an automatic cut of 23% of their Social Security retirement benefits. The Medicare trustees project that the Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, which finances Medicare Part A, so that's Medicare, would also become depleted in 2033, a deterioration from the projected depletion year of 2036, as I just said in last year's report. Upon depletion of the Medicare Trust Fund, payments to medical providers would be reduced by 11%. The reports make clear that the trust funds of these vital programs remain on an unsustainable path. The good news is that it is entirely within lawmakers' control to shore up Social Security and Medicare and preserve them for the future. Doing so will not only protect millions of beneficiaries and especially the country's most vulnerable citizens, but will provide stability and strength to the fiscal and economic outlook. So there are some corrective measures that lawmakers can take. I am not optimistic that this is going to happen anytime soon. I would love to see some movement about this. Well, it's kind of like, I wish I would have met you 10 years ago, or I wish I would have met you 5 years ago. I hear from people all the time. I wish they would have been working on this seriously 10 years ago. But they've got to get on it. Unfortunately, I believe that it's going to be a crisis situation. We're going to wait till the very end, and then we're going to have significant increases in revenue, because nobody is going to accept a cut. So we talk about a 23% cut in Social Security benefits. That is nobody's going to accept that cut, and they're going to vote, and they're going to vote the people who say, hey, we're going to have to cut benefits. They're going to vote those people out for somebody who's going to stand up and say, okay, well, we're going to do it another way. We're going to increase taxes or whatever, what have you. So there's going to be lots of polling to see what's most palatable for people, and certainly increase in revenue, and that is taxes, is going to be much more acceptable to the U.S. population than a cut in benefits. You're going to see people vote like they've never voted before, maybe. So the blow or key takeaways from today's reports. Let's go with one here. Number one. So these are, I went through and I pulled these out of, not out of the report, but out of the executive summary, and then out of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation's report, and then windowed it down a little bit more for you. Social Security, old age, and survivor insurance, that's Social Security again. Trust fund will be depleted by 2033, at which point benefits will be reduced by 23%. So we said that. The program's disability insurance trust fund would not be depleted over the 75-year projected period. If the two trust funds were hypothetically combined, they would be exhausted by 2034. So they're saying, if you combine, because the disability insurance trust fund, which is separate, that's got a positive 75-year outlook. And some might say, well, just take that money and combine it with Social Security. Well, that buys us one more year. And there was a projection that if there was some talk about eliminating tax on Social Security, that actually would have depleted the trust fund 1 year earlier. So that's not a solution for this. I'd like to see Social Security be tax-free for sure, and I'd certainly like to see. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. I'd like to see the bans, the provisional income bans that require and trigger Social Security taxation to be indexed for inflation, for crying out loud, because they haven't been since the 80s. But then again, but again, that's just a wish list. So takeaway number 2. Social Security faces large and rising imbalances relative to the size of the economy. The combined annual cash shortfall for Social Security will climb from 0.8% of GDP, gross domestic product, in 2025 to 1% in 2034. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's huge. The program's financial shortfall is caused largely by an aging population. As a result of the nation's changing demographics, the number of workers contributing to the program is growing more slowly than the number of beneficiaries receiving monthly payments. In 1965, there were 4 workers per beneficiary. That ratio has dropped to 2.7 today and will continue to fall in the future. When Social Security started, it was something like 42 to 1. In 65, it was 4 to 1. By the time, here we are, we're 2.7 to 1. By the time we hit 2045, we're at 2.2 to 1. So it's, we have, the baby boomer population came, really added a lot of people to our population. And then they had less babies, right? And then there's a little bit of pickup here with the next generation, but it's kind of too late and it's too slow, really. So here are the ratios. Number 4, delaying reform to Social Security is costly. If lawmakers act soon to address the trust fund shortfalls, they will be able to phase in changes gradually and responsibly in a way that does not harm vulnerable populations. However, delaying reform would require changes to the program. If action is not taken until 2034, the tax increases or benefit reductions required to stabilize the program's financing would be approximately 15% larger than if action were taken today. So there's some of the key takeaways. Okay, so what can lawmakers do to fix Social Security? So this comes from the Brookings Institute. So this is a really good guide. You can go through here. This is a very long report. It's 60 some pages, I believe, and I just pulled out some important, kind of, again, an executive summary. This is long. I'm going to go through as much as I can. We've got about 15 minutes left here. So here are the goals, the blueprint goals. No benefit reduction. I'm here. And again, if you're just listening on the podcast, I'm going through some bullet points and I'm just highlighting where they are on the screen. So no benefit reduction for current beneficiaries. That's vitally important. So any changes to Social Security really have to be at least 10 years out. So anybody, and this is just me talking here, but I would think what would be most acceptable to people, heading into retirement. All right, if you're within a 10-year window, expect your benefits to stay the same. Outside of a 10-year window, we're going to have to gradually change benefits. So there should be no benefit reduction for current beneficiaries, and I would say plus 10 years. But this is me. This add-on is me. Not the Brookings Institute. No general fund financing. Maintain the bipartisan nature of the program. Improve the system's progressivity. Increase risk protection and universal participation. So the plan adopts a balanced approach to achieving its goals, combining tax increases, targeted benefit adjustments, reductions for some beneficiaries and increases for others, and additional modifications. So here's revenue enhancements. So when you hear revenue, this equals tax, right? The plan incorporates 3 significant changes to taxation. Increase the taxable maximum ceiling, $730 billion in budget savings, 2025 to 2035. In 2024, about 80% of wages were subject to Social Security taxes, which is 10 percentage points less than in 1983. The proposal calls for, starting in 2027, increasing the taxable maximum ceiling faster than specified in the current law to reach a 90% target by 2039. Change rules. Next bullet point, change rules for pass-through payroll tax. This adds $553 billion. Currently, some self-employment investments are not subject to Social Security taxes, creating a loophole for certain owners of pass-through entities. Bullet point number 3, for benefit revenue enhances. That means increased taxes. Bullet point number 3, increase the payroll tax by 0.2 percentage points, $209 billion. So these first two are probably, and I'm just speculating on what, again, the general population is going to accept. Excuse me. These first two, I think, are no-brainers. This one's a big question mark in my mind because when you lay over a payroll tax of 0.2 percentage points, that hits everybody. It hits everybody who's on a payroll. Now let's talk about benefit reductions in this Brookings plan. Bullet point number 1, increase retirement age for high earners. That's an added $1 billion. Currently, everyone born in 1960 or later reaches full retirement age at age 67. The plan proposes increasing the retirement age by 2 months every year, starting in 2037 through 2054 for all top quintile earners. Since the change wouldn't take effect until after the projection period, the benefits are understated. Savings would be an estimated $99 billion from 2036 to 2045. That's significant. Bullet point number 2, under benefit reductions, increase the number of working years used when calculating Social Security retirement benefits. That's $19 billion savings. Brookings proposes raising the number of years of earnings in the calculation from 35 years to 40 years, which would better align benefits with life expectancy. Number 3, under benefit reductions. I had to keep seeing where we are, so I'm going to just write this 3. Tax all Social Security benefits of high earners, $241 billion. The plan calls for taxing all Social Security benefits of individuals with adjusted gross income of over $100,000 and couples over $125,000, setting their benefits apart from people with lower income profiles and are taxed on 50% of 85% of benefits depending on income. So they're saying tax it all. If you make over these certain amounts, you don't get the 50% of benefit or 85% of benefit. You tax it all. And the dependent retiree spouse benefit, $2 billion. Eliminate child, this is 5. So that was number 4. And the dependent retiree spouse benefit. Eliminate child or retiree benefits, $75 billion. The blueprint includes ending benefits for children of a parent who begins receiving their benefits in 2027. Brookings believes that the current policy incentivizes early retirement. Now let's look at benefit. And so they're reductions. So the 5 bullet points are reductions. So we had benefit reductions. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's look at benefit improvements. Increase survivor benefits. That reduces by $156 billion. The proposal would increase benefits for survivors up to 75% of the combined benefits instead of the survivor needing to choose between their benefits or the deceased partners. Doing so would be a closer match to the estimated typical drop in household expenses once one member of a couple has died. Interesting. Number 2. Under benefit increases, create a disability benefit for older workers with disabling conditions that make them unable to do their jobs. That's a negative $212 billion. There is a gap in coverage for those who are at least 58 and not sufficiently healthy enough to work, but do not qualify for the 2 other stringent Social Security disability programs: Social Security disability insurance and supplemental Social Security income. The proposal calls for creating an early retirement disability benefit for those workers who have fallen through the cracks. So adding a disability benefit for older workers. So number 3, restore and expand student benefits for children whose parents are disabled or dead. Number 4, provide a child benefit to grandparents or certain other relatives caring for children. That reduces by $62 billion. And then other. So now we've got the other provisions or other recommendations. So we've got 3 here. Devote all proceeds from taxable Social Security benefits to the trust fund, the Social Security Trust Fund. That's $755 billion. The proposal calls for ending a policy of redirecting proceeds of some benefit taxes to the Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, which was struggling 3 decades ago, but is now on better financial footing. I found that one really interesting. A lot of people don't know that the tax that's paid on Social Security, it goes directly back into the trust fund, the Social Security and Medicare Trust Fund. So none of it goes to the general fund. That's a misconception. And people say, the politicians just use that tax. Well, it's actually going to. This is an example where it's going right where it should. Number 2, expand the labor force by changing policies on legal immigration. $117 billion. Social Security is now facing a worker to beneficiary problem. So Brookings proposes increasing caps on various means of legal employment-based immigration. Number 3, achieve universal coverage in Social Security. That's an added $5 billion. The proposal seeks to migrate all workers to Social Security as opposed to the current system where some public sector workers remain outside the federal retirement system. And if you're a graph person, I've got the graph that shows here, the potential benefits and the reductions and decrease in benefits. So you can see that all again if you read the Brookings study. Again, I referred to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Both of those are really good resources. So what can you do? So we talked about what lawmakers can do. We talked about key takeaways. We talked about the Trustees report. So what can you do? Do your own analysis of your own options. Every client of ours goes through a detailed analysis of their Social Security claiming strategy. Sometimes they listen to us, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we make modifications, and that's okay. Most of the times they listen to us. But we've got one of the top Social Security analysts in the nation on our team, Heather Schreiber. So we don't offer that to the general public, but if you're a client of ours, you're gonna have that experience. And it's not just running a report, folks. Anybody can run a report for you that shows here's the optimal scenarios. You have to have, it's just like a financial planning tool. The financial planning tool is only as good as the data you're putting in and the person who's working that data. So that second part of it Well, they're both really important because there's not a lot of good data collected for most financial plans. Our clients tell us over and over again that, if we'll have somebody who's been working with a financial planner or a financial advisor for 20 years, and they'll say, we never went through a process like this before. And that's great. I love hearing that. But you also have to know how to work through the tools. It just can't be, let's run the simple analysis and here's the printout. You've got to have the knowledge, the expertise, the education behind it to be able to really give good recommendations, give appropriate recommendations for you, and not just rely on the software. Do your own analysis of your own options. Identify the risks. So I talked about that. If you're within 10 years of Social Security, you should probably pay attention to these things. You should pay attention to it anyway. But if you're knocking on the door of Social Security, you should be setting up your SSA.gov website, checking your history, making sure that everything is accurate, and then looking at your options. I've had conversations with close friends of mine that just are, I'm shaking my head because I love these guys, but some of their ideas about Social Security collection are just crazy and off the wall. So you get some thoughtful process behind your decisions, and identify the risks, of course. And a lot of this is age-based. Work on items in your control. So listen, whatever's going to happen to Social Security, we've got the ability to choose our representatives. That's it. So, from top to bottom, our representatives in government. So, we've got a little bit of control there, right? But as voters can move, and there's no doubt about it. And that's why you're not going to see, in my opinion, a reduction of Social Security benefits. You're going to see an increase in revenue. And that's one of the reasons that we're going to see higher taxes in the future, most likely. Very, very likely, in my opinion. But there are things that you can do to control, that you have control over. And the first one is really the first one I'm going to move up here is financial planning. Do a proper financial plan. And don't just do it once. Do it every single year, and have that just be part of your process, like pulling the weeds in your garden. Whether you're a do-it-yourself puller of weeds or your gardener, or you get somebody else do it, you got to go through there and clean things up. It's the same thing with your financial plan. Once you have it set, you've got to keep it monitored. You have to keep it running well. So whatever analogy works for you, pulling the weeds, changing your oil, maintaining your vehicle, whatever works for you, whatever triggers in your mind, find it and take advantage of that and develop your process. When clients are working with us, if they come in June, if they're June clients, they know that around every June, May, June, July, depending on their schedule, we're digging into financial planning. Find your time, whatever that may be. Your slow time might be during the summer. Hey, this is the time to get out the financials and go through it and have a process for that. And hopefully it's a good process. So go through that. Include tax planning in that. Not enough financial plans include tax planning. Not nearly enough. It is just a tiny sliver of the market that truly does tax planning, because the large firms that hold most of the client relationships, they say, we're not even going to talk about this. They say, we don't give tax advice. It says it right on the bottom of your statement. It says it all over their websites. Investment efficiency. We see so many people with age-based funds, or I've been with my financial advisor, I've been with my financial planner for the last 20, 30 years. I don't really know what they're doing. They make changes every now and then. Well, geez, how do you know? You don't have to be an expert at this, but you do have a responsibility to make sure that your things are efficient. I don't expect, again, you don't have to have a CFP, as an investor. You don't have to be as knowledgeable and as thorough as us, but you should ask questions. Make sure that your investments are efficient, and ask to be shown that. I would put our investments against anyone, and if anyone asks, tell us how efficient our investments are. And what's your process? I'm going to tell them our investments are reviewed on a regular basis. We have 2 investment committee meetings a week, where we go through and make sure that our investments are efficient and they're appropriate for the individual and our models as a whole. So we have these processes. We get updated. We do updated reporting every single month, and these are the kind of things that you want to do and you need to do to make sure that your process is efficient. Make sure you're stress testing. I over and over again. So for negative markets, higher taxes, effects of Social Security. For sure, you can say, okay, what Social Security claiming ages, strategies, and it could even be, okay, what if I see a reduction? What if I see a 23% reduction in my Social Security? I think that's a fine stress test too, if you're really that concerned about it. I don't think this is reality, folks. But if you're even a client of ours, if you say, I want to see what that's going to look like if we have a reduction in Social Security, we're happy to do that for you. But certainly negative markets, higher taxes, different claiming strategies, you should stress test these things. I was meeting with a newer client last week with one of our planners, and we showed them, their base facts of their plans, what it would look like if they hadn't met us, and they said, and we said to them, like we always say, this is where most plans start and stop. Now let's lay over. What if we have negative markets for the next 12 months, next 18 months, something like the Great Recession? Boom. Now instead of having $8 million at the end of their lifetime or whatever the number was, they're potentially running out of money at age 85. That's a big difference. And then we say, what if there's higher taxes? Boom, drops down. Well, what if you have a combination of the two? And that person said, we had a meeting with our existing planner not long ago, and that was exactly what happened. They said, look at the rosy outlook you have. Look how much money you're going to have at the end of your life. Geez, you're going to worry about, your biggest problem is going to be worrying about what happens to that money when you're no longer here. Well, let's hope that's the case. But many times you have to at least look at, always, you really have to stress test, look at, what if that's not the case? Does everything happen perfectly all the time? No, there's plenty of times when we have protracted bear markets. We know that taxes have to be higher in the future. We know. We here know. Because we do the work and we do the study and we stay on top of things. But to just sit there and say, well, geez, look how great everything's going to be if everything goes great. Well, you better make sure that you've got plans in place just in case those things don't go great. We hope they do. But we don't want it to be devastating for you because, if you're age 85 and it didn't go perfectly for you and things out of your control, negative markets, higher taxes, all the things that we know negative markets have to come. Higher taxes are very, 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 very likely to be in our near future within 10 years. So you've got to at least be looking at these stress tests. So they're the things that you can do. Work on items under your control and stay on top of things. So that is our webinar for today. That is our financial focus for today. I hope you found this helpful. If you haven't already, hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons on our YouTube channel. If you haven't already shared our podcast, I'd appreciate a share of the podcast. If you have any recommendations for us of topics you'd like to hear, if you don't like the way I did something or you love the way I did something, send me your feedback at questions@attleborowealth.com. That's questions@attleborowealth.com. And remember, there is no webinar next week. I will see you in 2 weeks. And I hope you have a great week. Take care.